Perfect. Thank you, Thomas. Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. From wherever you are joining today, thank you for coming to learn more about how to monetize your third-party Teams app. My name is James Skay, and I'm a senior product manager over in the Microsoft Teams engineering group. I've been focused on Teams app monetization for the last year, working to enable ISV partners to bootstrap their Teams app for app monetization capabilities, working to deliver assets and materials, as well as some programs internally and externally to help you be able to monetize your third-party Teams app. So thank you for joining today. For those of you that were just at the prior session where Bob German walked you through the foundation for how to build a Teams app, as well as a little nod to monetization, thank you for sticking around. And if you haven't, I highly encourage you to take a look at that session where Bob walked through some great resources. Today's your session, and so if you have questions, I'd really open it up for you to pose them into the chat window. We'll also save some time at the end for questions, but I'll keep an eye on the chat window as I'm presenting to see if there's anything that comes up. Otherwise, I'll just go through the content. Normally, I would be presenting through PowerPoint Live where the links are clickable, but one of the last things that I provide under the Getting Started is a link to this very guide that I'm presenting from today. So I highly encourage you to stick around, get that link, and then be able to be on your way. So first and foremost, let's actually start with an overview of what is a monetized Teams app. Now, I think we're all familiar on this call, like what a Teams app is and where it's available. It's available in the Teams App Store. Admins can install it from the Teams Admin Center. And then if you're really savvy, you can also install it and get it from AppSource. Now, if you're familiar with AppSource, you know that you can also buy apps and consulting services from AppSource. But not a lot of our end users are aware of AppSource or even have the ability to browse through there. So what we're essentially providing is the opportunity for you as a developer to actually create the ability for end users to buy directly within Teams as well as within Teams Admin Center. So here you can see this is an example of Contoso tasks for Teams where before there would just be the add button. And now there's a new button here called buy a subscription. Now, what does the ideal candidate look like when it comes to building a transactable app for Microsoft Teams? Well, these are just a few. Starting on the lower right, I think about these as kind of slices, right, around productivity, process improvement, collaboration, learning, etc. We're all familiar with the role that Microsoft Teams played as part of the pandemic. And so thinking about where people meet and how they connect is going to be key to any Teams app that you build, let alone if you choose to monetize it. So first and foremost, having that existing Teams app is going to be important. And if you don't, and you just joined Bob's session and learned about how to build a Teams app and you're looking to monetize it, absolutely great. But one thing to keep in mind is, what is the stickiness of your app? Is it something that end users are willing to pay for? Is it something that they're going to need every day to make their work life, or even for some, their personal life, productive or valuable? So that's one thing to consider as you're looking at building a monetized Teams app. Currently today, Teams only supports a per user model. I want to call out that we're working on a flat rate model, but when I talk about a per user model, it is your customer is paying a per user per month or a per user per year license for your transactable SaaS offer. We are working to build a flat rate, meaning it would be like a flat rate for a particular tenant without the need to manage a user assignment. Obviously, the ability to differentiate between a free and paid app is going to be key, right? So if someone is able to download an app for free out of the App Store and yours provides the exact same features, but you're charging, there's not much differentiation there. Just like, for example, having a freemium app where some baseline functionality is included, and if you want people to be able to enjoy the premium features, they can actually pay for it. Now, because we're requiring a per user model, there does need to be a license assignment model to it. But I think for those of you that were just here for Bob's session, you also saw where in our code samples on GitHub, there's a lightweight license management module included that you might be able to take advantage of if you don't have one of your own. And then last but not least, having a SaaS offer already published is going to be key, but if not, it's actually not very difficult. And I'm actually going to walk you through today how to actually go about doing that within Partner Center. But before I do, I just want to call out the benefits of our Modern Work ISV program. If you're not a part of this, I really encourage you to join today. By joining, you actually get specific benefits to help you build your app for teams, whether you're choosing to monetize it or not. And that can include dedicated technical team support, benefits, partner experience across our unified partner experience across Partner Center and App Source. But more importantly, you're going to get some go-to-market benefits that'll help you be able to have greater exposure to the engines that Microsoft has. Now, the thing that I also want to call out, not a lot of people are aware of this, but last year we announced that our transaction fee has been reduced from 20% to 3%. Now, many of you think, well, wait, isn't that what a credit card processor typically charges? And the answer is yes. And we are also providing the subscription management on our backend, meaning if the billing credit card expires, we take care of that. We are allowing the customers to choose to upgrade or downgrade different plans that you may or may not have. So the 3% is here to stay, and it's actually one that our partners have been asking for in order to be more competitive in the marketplace. As I mentioned, joining the Modern Work ISV has its benefits, and one of those is actually a financial incentive benefit where if you build a Teams app between now and the end of June of 2022, if you have a high quality app and it's scored accordingly, you're eligible to earn up to $10,000 for that application. And if you can grow your monthly active users within your application to 5,000 or above, that's an extra $20,000. So essentially you have some opportunity here for some financial incentives. And then kind of going back to where I started in the benefits program, if we think about, the left side as being Partner Center, it's funneling your apps that are published through Partner Center across our commerce platform, but it goes through different measures. The first one being direct. And this is where customers can actually choose to find your application or your offer within App Source, directly in the Teams product store, or even through Microsoft Teams or the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Those are our direct to customer motions. Then we also have our CSP program. This is something that we've just recently fine-tuned, where as an ISV, you're able to define a respective margin to offer CSP partners in order to bundle and sell your transaction or your service through their own deal. You're not having to work with the individual customers. You're working with a scale partner, a CSP who's using their own reach to meet customers where they are. And in an exchange, you're giving them a percentage or a margin, if you will, of your price. And all this stuff is configurable, of course, but more information is provided within this deck and online. And then last but not least, we have the Microsoft field. And Microsoft field is super important as we think about our largest enterprise customers. And so some of the most strategic and sought after Teams apps actually find their way into our sales field hands, where they're sharing those great applications with our customers and partners. So I'm going to spend the majority of our time here talking about the technical requirements, and then I'll also share some validation guidance, and then, as I mentioned, give you some links to get started. So the technical aspects can be brought down into 5 distinct steps. And the first one is actually creating your free Teams app. And as I mentioned, if you didn't see Bob's session, I highly encourage you to start there. Now, when you download this guide, you'll notice that we have the requirements on the left and we have a public source of information where you can learn more on the right. These are all clickable hyperlinks. So if you're not familiar with building your Teams app or where to start with Bob's video, and then also you can check out these links in this slide of this deck. But once you actually have your Teams app built, I actually heard Bob specifically mention the words landing page and webhooks. So some of you, this will actually be familiar. We need you to create a landing page and webhooks where you're going to receive customers who have actually purchased the Transactable SaaS offer through Microsoft. Now, in just a moment, I'll have an example of what this entails, but essentially, Microsoft transacts the commerce on your behalf, and then we send them to your site, where you then actually help them provision, or through automation, help them provision, set up the accounts, etc., and then direct them back to Teams. Now, the webhook is important because, as I mentioned, Microsoft is managing the commerce on your behalf. But what happens if a credit card is expired and we work with the customer to get it updated? What if we don't hear back from them? We need to alert you that there's no payment for that subscription as an example, or if somebody wants to upgrade from a standard to a premium SKU that you offer, we manage it on the back end. And so you need to be able to know exactly when that happens so you can unlock those extra capabilities and features for them within your SaaS offer. So as I mentioned, here's the example. And so if we start on the upper left, a user completes the purchase in the Teams App Store. They found your app, they've chosen to buy a subscription, and then they choose your plan, and then they enter their payment information, and then they check out. At this point, they're going to be redirected to a landing page on your website. And what's important here is that a token is passed inside the URL as a variable. Now, you're going to take that token and through some API calls to the Microsoft backend, you're going to receive what I call the package. And that package is going to include the details of the purchase, the number of seats purchased, whether it was per month or per year, as well as the plan and any other information that you need in order to provision your software. Now, what's going to happen at that same point is you're going to then provision your side or your part of the SaaS offer, and then you're going to send an acknowledgement back to the Marketplace API that says, we're good to go. We have the tenant admin consent. Everything is good to go. Please begin the billing. Now, at that point, the app is activated, and then the user can go back into Teams. And if they didn't add the app, they choose to add the app. Or if they added the app, they then just use single sign-on and log in. And then, as I mentioned, that webhook is going to manage everything in the interim as, as changes happen. Now, while we're on this slide, I want to call out a few other things. You're going to notice there's some information on the right-hand side, whether that be a frequently asked question or a best practice. Now, I might not cover all of them during this presentation, but it's there for a reason. And so as you download this guide to build your transactable SaaS offer, please keep your eye out on this content. Now, the one that I want to call out here is SSO or single sign-on required? And the answer is yes. Now, think about this from a couple different perspectives. Microsoft 365 prides itself on having a unified authentication method. Not only that, but we want to make sure that we know who the users are who are buying the SaaS offer, as well as enabling them to use it. And then, as I also mentioned, what is the token? And I kind of described that already. So as we move on from here, I want to kind of also highlight, if you will, at a high level, that a word of caution. These APIs can be deceptively simple to implement, but please make sure that you've gone through and validated end-to-end before submitting. And I'll talk about validation more towards the end, but essentially, you take your SaaS offer that you have published, and then you decide where you want to integrate, like the single sign-on, and where you want to integrate, for example, your features behind a paywall. Now, again, you'll see here on the right, there's some best practices around before submitting for validation. Make sure you performed things like licensing counts and the assignment in your system, such that we make sure that when our test team goes through to validate that as they increase or decrease the number of licenses through our backend systems, that it reflects accordingly with yours. One thing I will share out here is a landing page and license management. And again, this kind of walks through at a high level. And again, a reminder that Teams currently only supports a per user assigned license model. There's also guidance in this deck where if you do have a flat rate model, don't change your application whatsoever to fit our model, but I have explicit instructions on how you can keep your flat rate model going and be able to incorporate it into the Teams App Store once we do support that. Now here, for example, the users hit configured now, and they're going to land on your landing page. Now, this is just an example of what a landing page might look like. Now, in this case, there's an option to assign licenses to the organization, which is a requirement, a product tour, as well as how to contact support for customer needs. We want to make sure that we're reducing the friction, for adoption of your product and also for support. So those are two things to keep in mind as best practices when you are publishing a SaaS offer. Now, once they've clicked on the landing page and they might choose to assign licenses, here you can see where this ISV, as an example, Contoso, has actually iterated some users from their tenant, and it's doing two things, right? In this example, there can be two different types of roles, whether that be a user or a manager. And a manager role is defined however this example wants to do it. For example, Managers might be able to assign licenses to other individuals even though they weren't the subscriber. A manager might be able to go into edit mode across the SaaS app, etc. But the other part that I want to talk about from an adoption perspective is consider sending a message or notifying a user who may have a license assigned. Now, in the example that I've walked through, I may have gone into the Teams App Store or through Teams Admin Center and bought 100 licenses for my organization. I've then assigned them to individuals. But guess what might not actually happen? Those end users who have a license assigned might not know that I just assigned them a license. So whether or not you're choosing to use email or perhaps a Teams bot to communicate with them, consider a way of notifying an end user that a license was just assigned to them. And in this case, this example is saying, how would you like to send a welcome message? Is it via Teams chat or email or just email or nothing at all? Now, jumping into our step 3. Now, this is where we actually create that transactable SaaS offer inside of Partner Center. Now, if you're not familiar with Partner Center, it can seem kind of daunting at first, but Partner Center is essentially the brains behind the entire operation across the Microsoft AppSource Marketplace, Azure Marketplace, etc. There's a lot of funneling that goes on in between. And so we try to do a really good job of highlighting the explicit steps, including specific screenshots to walk you through. Now, after you've created your landing page and your webhook, because those are going to be the prerequisites as we create the transactable SaaS offer, you'll then go into Partner Center where you'll actually create that new transactable SaaS offer. You'll specify your offer details, and then we're going to talk in a minute about preview and testing your offer. Now, here's some examples of what I just mentioned. We show you the screens. Going into Partner Center under the commercial marketplace, because that's where AppSource and Office apps transact, we're going to click on new, and we're going to say create a software as a service. And at this point, we're going to create on our own an offer ID and an offer alias. Now, these are important because these are going to serve a purpose later. And at this point, we're going to then configure the SaaS offer. Now, in this example, Pig Latin Premium was an app that we used internally just to help us vet this, but this would be the exact same steps through your own experience. You want to provide a descriptive name. Under setup details, you must select, yes, I would like to sell through Microsoft and have Microsoft host transactions on my behalf. If that box or that radio button is not checked, nothing else will work. We also want to define what are the primary categories and industries that your Teams app or your SaaS offer is going to be discoverable. This allows you for like search engine optimizations and other reasons for your offer to be public. And at this point, here's where you start to actually build your offer. Like, what do your logos look like? Are there any extra descriptives that you want to call out? I mentioned search keywords here. In addition, preview audience. Now, this is going to be key. So because we're transacting, it involves real money. Now, the preview audience is a way for you as a publisher to test your transactable offer without making it public for everyone else to transact. Now, a good best practice is someone might actually create a transactable offer for $1 or for a penny, which is a great way, right? There's not a lot of lost change or a lot of you're not out a lot of money. But you don't want to have that offer public for $1 where end users could actually transact and buy your SaaS offer for a penny per month or a penny per year, when really your goal is to charge $20 or $25. So in this step of the game, in the preview audience, you're able to define either the Azure Active Directory tenant ID or the an actual account or an email. Now, what this means is once you're logged in under this actual account, when you go into AppSource, as an example, you will see the offer. If you're not logged in with one of these accounts, you're not able to see the offer. So this is going to be super key and important as we go through the validation process. Now, the landing page and webhook, I mentioned them a couple times. They're super important. And why is that? Well, we now need to tell the SaaS offer where they're going to be transacting business. Is it going to be in landing, where's the landing page and where's the webhook? And so under the technical configuration, in addition to providing some Azure Active Directory tenant and application IDs, here's where you plug in those URLs. Now, once you've done that, you're now able to create plans for each of your SKUs. Now, this is an example for differentiation. Now, you might just have a single plan, and that plan could just be, whatever you want to call it, could be standard. But if you want to differentiate between value, you might create a standard, a deluxe, and a premium, or a silver, gold, and platinum, however you want to do it. And this is where you go about doing that. And this will come back in just a second. And so as you go through each one of these definitions, you're going to do a couple different things. The first one is you're going to define the markets in which you want your transactable SaaS offer to be available. Now, why is this key? It's key for a couple of reasons. The first one being that Microsoft, for many countries, will collect and remit tax on your behalf. Now, it's a no-brainer. It's no extra overhead for you. Microsoft transacts, pays you, and then pays the tax for the respective areas. But there are some other markets and countries in which Microsoft transacts business but does not collect and remit tax on your behalf. And so as you go through the markets, make sure you pay close attention to what is Microsoft tax remitted and what is not, because that will definitely help steer you in the right direction. From a pricing model, again, if you're flat rate, you can continue and there's extra guidance provided to you. But in this case, we're going to define a per user. Now, let's say that we also want to provide a limit. So as I mentioned, there could be a standard, deluxe, and premium offer that you're looking to provide, or there could be I'm going to provide one rate for 1 to 50 licenses. I'm going to provide another rate for 50 to 100 licenses and another rate for 500 plus. Here's where you're able to define the user limits. And so for some transactable offers, they don't want to offer anything less than 3 licenses or 5 licenses. And in this case, we have a minimum license count of 1 and a max of 500. Now, you're also able to define here your price points. Are your price points going to be, are you going to offer a monthly or just an annual rate? You can do both. And as a best practice, we encourage you to consider offering a slight discount for people who choose to pay upfront for a year because they're investing and committing to a particular time period. What's not located on here is that if you set these prices in US dollars, Microsoft will automatically convert them to the local currency for the other countries in which you're choosing to transact your business. What's super important to call out is if you want to, you are able to be explicit with your own prices in each of the individual markets that you are looking to manage. A great example, it might be $10 per month in the US. That might actually be less than pounds in the UK as an example, and you might want to still charge £10 in the UK. The way to go about it is you hit here where it says export pricing values for this product. It'll give it to you in an Excel worksheet where you then modify it and then you upload it back into the tool. And then last but not least, I want to call out what the free trial here means. So you're essentially allowing your users, once they've chosen to purchase a subscription, to have a free 30-day trial to your app. Now, this means that they're going to go through the checkout process and they're going to enter their billing information. And then once they submit and then you acknowledge back to us to provision the subscription, their first 30 days are going to be free. And then on day 31, they're going to be charged. So you need to consider, do you want to enable that free trial or not? And as a best practice, we've learned from other ISVs that not having a free trial could actually be a barrier for people to try to experience the software. They don't want to commit before trying it out. Some questions that I often get asked is the free trial customizable? Nope, but we're working to change that. We want you to be able to potentially define the length of the trial. Second, do we have to require payment information at time of sign up for a free trial? The answer, yes. But we're looking to maybe change that to give you the opportunity. One other thing to call out, we've seen some other ISVs create a $0 SKU, and that might be for education customers. Note, whatever transactions happen through Partner Center, through this workflow, do require payment information, whether the SKU is $0 or it's a free trial, etc. So just keep that in mind. Now, I mentioned if you are selling a flat rate offer, please continue to do so. But you just can't transact in Teams App Store or the Teams Admin Center just yet. But that doesn't mean that you can't transact in AppSource. Now, I kind of preface this by saying not a lot of end users know about AppSource. So what does that mean? Well, in theory, what happens is you're going to publish your application in both Teams, and then you're also going to publish your transactable SaaS offer in the Partner Center. it's going to then show up in AppSource. And what we highly encourage you to do is to provide in product messaging that says, this app requires a subscription, and then you'll click from there and your user will land on AppSource. They'll transact on your offer and everything else will happen as I've just mentioned. I want to call out a very important caveat. It's super important that on a mobile device, whether it's a phone or a tablet, in the app experience cannot link to any other app store for payment, and AppSource is considered one of those. So please make sure you keep that offer and top of mind here. Now, what does this mean once we eventually support flat rate and we're looking to unlock it pretty quickly? All you need to do once we support it is update your app manifest, which I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes, with your offer and publisher ID, resubmit it for validation, and then the buy button will show up in the Teams app store. Now, as I mentioned, I'm kind of going quick. There's a lot of content here, but if there's questions on that, please provide them in the chat window, and I'll be happy to answer. Now, we're almost close to publishing the app offer inside the marketplace. Now, what's great about Partner Center, and you can see here from the screenshot, is it's kind of showing you the expectation of timing in terms of validation, the preview creation, the sign off, the certification, and publish. You want to go through each one of these steps to make sure that you're aware of what's either passed or failed, and then to go from there. Now, it's super important to call out that there's two validation touch points that happen. The first one is your offer, which is validated through automation on AppSource. And the second one is your Teams app, Teams app validation. Now, your offer is published, as I mentioned, but the monetization aspect is not. And so at this point, they're going to see like a web app listing inside of AppSource, but they don't necessarily know where that connects to. So we need to link it to the Teams app, and it comes in two ways. The first one is to link the app manifest, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, about including the offer and publisher ID so that the buy button shows up inside of Teams. But the second one is to link it in Partner Center. So as I mentioned here, like this web app, the web app will actually show that there is a Teams app associated to it. So it's important that you link your transactable SaaS offer to your app in these two ways. Now, it can be a bit confusing because for the first one here, linking it to your Teams app through the Teams developer portal can happen through two ways. You can either do it through the Teams developer portal where you're providing your publisher and your offer ID, which is the recommended path, or you're also able to go into the app manifest and you're able to provide your publisher and your offer ID here specifically. And so there's some documentation on how to go about doing that here. So we've now linked your offer in Teams for the Teams App Store, but now it's important that we do the same thing for Partner Center. And this is actually what's going to land in AppSource. And so here you can see at the offer setup, you say, yes, I published Teams app in Office Admin or SharePoint, and I'd like to link to that SaaS offer. So what you'll see here now is we had a Pig Latin Premium that just had web app, and it didn't have any apps associated to it. So once we've actually provided the AppSource link inside of Partner Center in the configuration, it's going to link your web app with your Teams app. The web app is what actually is transacting the commerce for your transactable SaaS offer, and the Teams app is actually where it is being stored. Now, I want to spend a few moments talking about validation. Now, it's key here that, as I mentioned, there's two validations that take place. Your app or your app through Teams, and then also your transactable SaaS offer. When we look at the validation and publication of your Teams app, there can be some kind of gotchas that you need to include. Now, as you go into Partner Center, here's actually where, remember, Partner Center is where you publish your app, whether it's monetized or not. Like I said, Partner Center is like the nucleus or the hub for many things. If you have anything that is out of the ordinary around user flow, or there might be prerequisites, or there might be a dependent service that a tester might not know because they haven't really gone through the purchase flow, please call that out inside of Partner Center. We've had a few partners actually include hyperlinks to a shared OneDrive file where they actually do a voiceover recording of them going through their app end to end, such that they can actually help the validation team understand what they should be testing. Now, in an ideal state, they don't need that information because it should be user intuitive. But if it's not, please make sure to call that out. Now, before you do submit your app for publication, let's take a look at some kind of gotchas that we've seen happen on the back end. Now, the first one is that purchase experience on mobile. And I mentioned that before about the flat rate offer. But again, please make sure that we're not including any links to in-app purchases, offers that mention trials or upsell to a paid version that would come across ever on a Teams app on a mobile or tablet device. Now, I call it the Teams app, right? So it's the Teams app that's hosting your software in the mobile or tablet version. If it's a desktop version or a web-based version that's not through the Teams app, it's a different story. And so ultimately, we're looking for you to be able to differentiate your messaging, whether it is a mobile tablet experience versus desktop or web. I won't drain the slide, but I'll call out a few things. Please make sure that you understand the policy requirements. There's a hyperlink here and in this guide that you can actually go through to help you get through all of our policies such that you're not surprised by something. And the sooner in your development lifecycle you can actually take a look at this and understand, the better off your publishing experience will be. Unsupported license models, as I mentioned, flat rate is not supported, which is fine. You can continue with the guidance provided. Another gotcha is making sure that the publisher for the Teams app meets and matches the publisher for the Transactable SaaS offer. You can't have an app developed from one partner that is attributed to one partner and then the SaaS offer attributed to another. I call out the details for the test, but then also anything that might confuse end users. Please make sure to call that out. You might get some pushback from the team if something doesn't actually make sense. They might ask you for changes. The lower right is actually something we've seen multiple times. In this case, the ISV had a $5 and $10 per user per month offer. And then they said, well, I want it to be $4 per user per year. What they really wanted it to be was $48 per user per year, which is a slight discount. And so in this case, it actually would be cheaper for the end user to pay $4 per user per year than it would be for them to pay $5 per user per month. So these are some of the gotchas it's important for you to keep in mind as you're going through. I'm not going to drain this, but this is meant to be a place for you to understand if you have where you might land on a spectrum of, do you have a Teams app? Do you have a Transactable SaaS offer? And these are the different combinations and permutations of what needs to happen and when. This is much more applicable to those that are further along in both their Teams app and Transactable SaaS offer journey. But I include this here specifically because this has been a great help for many partners as to what will happen from a validation perspective. Let's talk about support. So Partner Center is the nucleus, right? Partner Center manages everything from this perspective. That's also going to be your first stop for self-service. Now, some people say that it's really daunting to traverse Partner Center, and I say, get a cup of coffee, make a glass of tea, come back and think about what you need, and then go through the motions to open up your support ticket. They pre-qualify you with a lot of questions to make sure that they're able to get you to the right subject matter expert as quickly as possible. There's a lot of expertise that goes into Partner Center, and there's not very many generalists that can just help you triage out of the gate. So we want to make sure we're able to direct you to the right subject matter expert. Then the second bullet point here is for Teams app submissions. Once you've submitted your Teams app for validation itself and you've heard back from the team, here's an email address that you can actually follow up with that team. Not until you've actually submitted and heard back from them are they likely going to engage with you, because there's a pretty big backlog of apps at any given point that they're trying to solve for. But again, also make sure that you're checking our public documentation about what is publicly available with regards to guidance. Now, we're about 34 minutes into this, and I want to leave some questions or time for questions at the end. But how can you get started? When I look here, there's a couple different things. At the top, I mentioned the benefits of the modern work ISV. Super important for you to understand the power of that, and it's free to sign up. So here's a hyperlink for that. Download this guide. This deck is a slightly modified version of a published PDF that I've created, and I continue to update for both our internal field and our external partners. This URL will always have the latest updates, so maybe even bookmark this. So as, for example, once we do launch flat rate offer, the guidance will be updated in this technical document as well. And then Bob did a great job of talking about all the great stuff that's available, for example, on GitHub, both from a code sample that we created, but also from some of the work that he and his team have done around different things like AppCamp and whatnot. So please make sure to download those code samples on GitHub. I do want to call out, and I think Bob touched on this briefly, that it does require a Microsoft 365 tenant and Azure subscription. Now, if you don't have one, that's fine. I mentioned there's benefits for signing up as part of the Modern Work ISV, and that is one of them. Here's another example, or just an iteration of the code samples on GitHub. I'm not going to drain this because I think Bob did a great job of actually showing you the contents, but essentially what I do want to call out is that there's not only a deployment guide on how to deploy this in your instance of Azure, but there's a video that walks you through the different iterations of how to use the license management component with the flags, for example, that Bob said around, first come, first served, or over provisioning as an example. And then I want to end here, but I want to end here on a positive note. Many people look at this and they say, wow, this is an eye chart. If there's one slide that I would print out or have available, this would be it. This walks you through from A to Z, everything that you need to understand from once you have a built Teams app, the steps that are required to get you fully through published with monetization. It does a couple things. It talks about the complexity and time. Think about the complexity as, is it going to be low-hanging fruit? Is it going to be a muscle stretch? And what is the time that it could take in order to either create something or have something validated? Now, I want to caveat this by saying two things. One, this varies by publisher and partner. The first one, if you're part of a large organization, you might have a specialist that can, that does nothing but does landing pages and webhooks with Azure. That might not take them a week. It could take them a day. And the second part is every experience might differ. So even though you might have an expertise in landing pages and webhooks, you might get hung up in validation because something wasn't provided, et cetera. So just kind of use this as a guidance to help you be able to calculate in your mind if you're working, if you're developing on behalf of somebody else, or you have venture capitalists as an example that are backing you, you can kind of give them some direction about where you can land approximately. Now, the other two things that this provides is where you can learn more. And these are all hyperlinks here that you can click. Also, I like using PowerPoint Live, and also where to get support. So it's super important that as things happen, you're able to check this off. And I love this as a checklist as well. So it helps me understand where in my life cycle of publishing a monetized Teams app do I sit. And with that, I want to say thank you for joining us today.